Today we're going to start on the real Greek. We're going to learn something you can write down, something you can make sense out of. And this is chapter 3, page 20 of Machen, and then in the workbook on page 1. The exhortation that Machen gives us about vocabularies, he said that we should learn the vocabulary after you learn the paradigms and the explanation parts of the sentence. In other words, we ought really to learn the forms, learn all the grammar, then learn the vocabulary, then do the exercises. Now, we're not going to do that exactly. We're going to take it a little bit in order, and we'll talk about the vocabulary first. But please try to learn that after you've learned the forms. It's not so important in this lesson, but in the future lessons it will make a difference. Let me also give you an exhortation of my own, and that is that if you do not learn the vocabulary, especially, and the forms, secondarily, then you're not going to understand Greek. You must learn that vocabulary. That's a very important thing. So let me say, get your tape out, use it. The vocabulary tapes, these tapes will give you the forms and the vocabulary over and over and over. Use it, take it in your car, do whatever you can to listen to this tape often. And the cards, whether you make your own or use the ones already prepared, do use the cards. Take them with you. Use them, learn them over and over so that it becomes second nature to you. And the quizzes, you'll notice, will be both Greek to English and English to Greek. I may give me the word for I see, and I'll expect you to be able to give me the Greek as well. We'll do that for the first 8 or 10 lessons, and then we'll stay strictly with the Greek to English. But for now, learn them both ways, backward and forward, so that you can really master the meanings of the words, then you can go on to other things. Now, the vocabulary of this lesson, lesson 3, page 20, paragraph 16. Here it is. Vlepo, I see. Notice, vlepo, V sound. Vlepo, I see. Yinosko, I know. Now that gamma there has a Y sound because there's an E to it. Yinosko, I know. Y sound. Grafo, I write. Notice I tried to roll my R there. Grafo, I write. Didasko, I teach. Didasko, I teach. Lamvano, I take. Lamvano, I take. Lego, I say. Leo, I loose or I destroy. Echo, I have. That's the vocabulary. Now, with a verb, whether it's in English or in Greek, you have certain aspects. We call these the aspects of the Greek. And they are tense, voice, mood, person, and number. Now in the workbook, you see on page 1 the various tenses. And we're going to pick up this, we'll be on this page throughout our study of the Greek. We'll have tense, and then on the next page, voice and so forth. And now we'll show you that as we go. But for now, tense. And I'm going to give you a general definition of the particular aspect, and then we'll give you the specific definition or the particular tense in which we are working. Now, the general description of tense is, it describes the action of the verb in relation to the time of the action and kind of action. So when you talk about a tense, you're going to be talking about what kind of action does it represent and what time of action does it represent. Now, time of action is only in the indicative. When we get to the other moods, we'll talk about that. But for now, we want to know in the present tense, this is what we're studying in this chapter, present tense. What time is it? Well, in the indicative, the time of the present tense is the present time. So in your workbook, write out here, present time. Time of action in the present tense is present time. Kind of action is continuous. Continuous. You can represent that by a dotted line. Continuous action. Continuing. Now, that's true in one aspect, but it also is, it refers to point of action. So, continuous action and point of action in the present tense. We also have voice. Tense, voice. Now on page 2 you see the general definition of voice. Voice describes the relationship between the subject and the action of the verb. Now, specifically the active voice. We're talking only about active here. Active, write this in, shows the subject producing the action. The active voice, the subject produces the action. And that's the definition of active voice. Mood. Mood, general, the mood describes the relationship between the statement and reality. Is it real? Is it unreal? Is it fulfilled? Is it unfulfilled? Specifically, we're dealing with the indicative mood here. In the indicative mood, the statement is assumed to be true. The statement is assumed true in the indicative mood. And then we have person on the next page. Notice these other moods we'll be talking about in other chapters. We'll come back to those later. The person. In general, the person describes the voice. Person describes the action of the verb in relation to the one who is speaking. Now, if I'm using first person, I'm saying it's the person speaking. First person, the person speaking. Write that in your workbook. The person speaking. Second person is the person spoken to. And third person is the person spoken about. Person speaking, person spoken to, person spoken about. That's person. Number is probably the simplest aspect, and that is, it tells whether the speaker is one or more. And if it's one, it's singular. If it's more, it's plural. There is no dual, as in some languages, only singular and plural. One, more than one. That's number. Now, we have to distinguish in our forms between tense, voice, mood, person, number. And there will be a different form for each one, as opposed to English. You note that in English we have only one form of the verb. For instance, we may say, I loose. You loose. Now, I don't change the form of the verb at all. I simply say, I loose, you loose. Same verb will do for both. I have to indicate who is doing the loosing by putting a pronoun in. You don't need that in Greek, but in English we have to have it. The verb stays same. Loose, loose. We do have a hint of a change that in the third person singular, if I want to say he, I don't say he loose. I shouldn't. I say he looses. Looses. There's a little s there, which indicates the third person. That's the only difference we have in the verb form in English, in the third person singular. Then I may say, we loose, you loose, and then they loose. Now, in English we have only one change in form. In Greek we have a form for each one of those. So we'll look at those on the next page, and this is in your workbook on page 20, paragraph 18. Now, here's what we have indicated there from here on down. This is paragraph 18. Now, what we have is the stem, and the stem of Leo is this, just without the omega. So, the stem of vlepo is vlep, the stem of grapho is graph, the stem of lego is leg, the stem of didasko is didask. Now, this then becomes the ending. This tells me I have first person because I have the first person suffix. Now, if I draw a line then down here, understanding this is the stem, and I draw a line right down here, then I have the first person, and this is singular. I have the first person singular, I have the second person singular, and the third person singular. O, is, e. The same is true in the plural. Omen, ete, usi. So, understanding that this is the stem and that there's a stem in every word, then we won't learn every word in these, we'll simply learn the endings. So for the present active indicative of any word, I will add to it these endings: o, is, e, omen, ete, usi. And you'll find on the cassette tape that we have spoken these many times. O, is, e, omen, ete, usi. O, is, e, omen, ete, usi. Use that as a way of learning the endings, and then put those endings on any stem. If I have it on the loose stem, then this means I loose. If I have it on the vlep stem, it means I see. Or if I put the vlep down here, it would be you see. Now, the translation then will be, for this one, I. For the second person singular, you. Third will be either he, she, or it, because the person spoken to or about could be he, she, or it, or the thing spoken about. Then we have the we, and the Machen has ye because of the, he used that in his day. We will use you, plural, or you could put ye if you want. I have no problem with that. Ye. Or you can put y'all. How about that? Y'all. Either way, but this one, instead of thou, we'll write you. So you will be singular, and if I mean you plural, I have to put a plural. You plural, or ye. Ye's not too bad. Or y'all. The reason we don't stay with the thou is that thou makes you say a different verb. Thou loosest, as you see there, and that can get all kinds of difficult. So we'll stay with that. You for singular, you plural, or ye, or y'all for second person plural. Then we have, of course, they as the third plural. Now, learn not only your vocabulary then for this lesson, but learn also the endings, and then be able to put those endings on any verb. The rest of the chapter is simply explaining some of the things which I showed in the chart there. In paragraph 21, for instance, says, there is no distinction between I loose, which simply represents the action as taking place in present time, and I am loosing, which calls for a continuation, or calls attention to the continuation. So what he's saying is, when I say Leo, I loose, or Leo, I am loosing, I'm really saying something different, but the Greek only has one form for that. When we get into the past tense, it will be two separate forms for that. This is looking at the action as happening, looking at it as a happening. We normally denote a point, though the point can be very wide. It's still a point, looking at it as happening. The continuation would be more like that. I am loosing, a continuation thing. So, note that in paragraph 21. And then, I think you're ready to go to the exercises. Once you've learned all of that, remember, don't do your exercises until you've learned them all, the forms and the vocabulary. Have it down cold, and then go to the exercises and write the English that represents this Greek. You see in paragraph 23? He has vlepis, enoskis, lomvanis. If you're doing this in some kind of class, the instructor should go over all of these very carefully, go one by one, and let you drill on this. And then when you do your homework, you'll need to write this to be graded, or grade it yourself if you're doing it on your own. Vlepis will be you see, enoskis, you know, lomvanis, you take, and so forth, on through that section. And then when you come to the we are knowing, or we see, or we are seeing, then you have you go to the other way and you make the Greek word that represents that. Now when you get to we see and we are seeing, remember that's going to be the same word, because when I say I loose, I am loosing, if I want to say we see, I will do vlepomen, and vlepomen can either be we see or we are seeing. See? So what he's doing is asking you to write that same word twice in response to those two phrases. Now, continue to do that until you really understand it, and you should have the present active indicative down, and then after that we'll go on and get some subjects in lesson 4 and 5, and we'll be able to write complete sentences. Do your homework, make sure it's all done, keep up with it, and then we'll see you on lesson 4.